Hello and welcome to this session where we're going to review the use of the CourseViewConnect component of the AutoScholar Advisor system in the use of at-risk student identification. So when you visit the URL that's been supplied to you for this purpose, you will go ahead and enter your staff credentials here under user ID and password, and you'll also notice this option here, Do Anonymize. And here you use this if you want to scramble the names of the students and the student numbers. That's because we will be looking at course results in a second. And so I'm going to turn this to true. And of course, as a staff member at your institution, you would leave that on false most of the time. So only when you're using this for presentation purposes, when you don't want someone who can see your screen to see the names of students and their identities and so on, then you switch that to true. So I'll click connect, and then it's loading up a lot of data in the background, and then it's presented us with a list of at-risk students you can see in the center here. So this is in the context of a specific course, and you can switch the course up here. So you can change your course code, and then you can choose the year in which you want to do that analysis and click update, and then the page will reload and you'll get the list of at-risk students for your course. So here you can see some strange looking strings, and that's totally because we selected Do Anonymize. So with anonymization turned on, you'll get these scrambled strings here. So you would normally see the student's first name and last name and the student number, and we'll just accept that that's what that's going to look like now. The rest is exactly the same as it would be. So we see a list of issues here. So we've got a list of at-risk students here, and among these students we have identified specific issues, and you'll see some codes listed here. It's not quite readable in this present form, and so please note that this component, CourseViewConnect, is still under revision, and we are in the process of a major revamp here. So it's functional. You can use the main functionality under the at-risk section right now. So this is for early access use only. Later on, all these elements of the text and so on will be much easier to understand. But to explain what this is, first off, we notice here that there are 4 assessments in this course. So they've been summarized with these codes. That's probably test mark 1, test mark 2, and so on. And then here we have the mean. So the system has calculated the mean mark in this test, and then the standard deviation. So that gives you an idea about the spread among the marks in that course, and then the number of students that have sat that assessment. So the basic stats are listed here. And you see at the bottom here, at-risk settings. So if you click on that, you see it's an accordion style of a thing. So here there are some parameters which you can adjust. We'll talk just now about adjusting those parameters, and that will help us refine our selection of at-risk students. So for now, let's leave it as it is, and let's have a look here at the at-risk students. So as we said, the first name and last name will appear here along with the student number, and then the first piece of information is alert index. So this basically tells us that there are 2 alerts for the student. And if you read here, you can see TM1, so test mark 1, the Z value for the test mark is less than minus 1.5. And so the Z value is the number of standard deviations away from the mean. So for example here, test mark 1, that has a mean mark of 89%. So over all students, the mean mark is 89%, quite a high mark for an assessment. And now this student has accomplished a mark of 66%. So that is, of course, significantly less than the mean. And if you look at the standard deviation here, it's 11, it's almost 12. So this student has a result that's more than a standard deviation below the mean. So in other words, the system says this is quite significantly far below the mean. So the Z score here is almost 2. So the student is almost 2 standard deviations below the mean mark by the other students. In other words, the system has interpreted this mark as being quite low. You could argue that 66 is still a passing mark in an assessment. However, the system it does try to balance that. So the system also looks at the absolute mark. However, because this mark is significantly below what most of the students are accomplishing, it does count this as an alert. So that's how we read these Z values. So Z value of almost -2 means this is a very low score, even though it is a passing mark. So the system kicks out an alert for the mark, for test 1 mark for the student. Furthermore, the system does also raise an alert for test mark 2. Now, if you look at test mark 2, you've got a mean mark of 67% and a standard deviation of 16. So there's a greater spread in test mark 2, and the average mark is lower. So this time the average or this student's mark is not more than 1.5 deviations below the mean, but still it's a mark below 50%. So the system has raised an alert because just because of this absolute value of this mark. So for this particular student, there are 2 alerts that have been raised, and they are alerts on different assessments. So it classifies this student as being at risk. Something also to notice is that it is possible that many students will have multiple alerts. So if everyone on the course is getting, say, 5 alerts, then this student wouldn't show up on this list, because there is another parameter here. You can see alert index is 2 and Z alerts is 2.48. So that means this value of 2, the fact that the student has 2 alerts, that is significantly different from all the other students. So on average, well, we can't see here what the average number of alerts is, but this value of 2 is quite far above the average number of alerts by other students in this course. And so overall, it defines the student to be at risk. And then you can see here for another student, this student also has 2 alerts, and there are 3 comments here. And that's because you see there are 2 comments on the same course. So it's not going to double count the same course as a separate alert. So there are 2 comments, but this counts as 1 alert. So the one low mark of 32%, which is also telling us that there's a very low number of standard deviations or many standard deviations away from the mean. This is talking about the same mark. So it's not counting a separate alert there. And then the student also has a mark below 50 on test mark 3. So this is counted as 2 alerts, and that is significantly more alerts than for the other students, and so on. So that's the idea. So you can see here 2 marks below 50% and so on. So that's how we calculate the at-risk students. We look at the number of alerts that have been issued for each student when given the mean mark or when we calculate the mean mark. So that's how we identify these students. Now you can imagine that there are some specific choices made here, right? 1.5 standard deviations. That is an arbitrary choice, if you like. Even this mark of 50, some might want to set more stringent criteria, some might want to set less, and you can change your parameters here. So under at-risk settings, you can change the alert min value. So the test for the absolute mark. So when a student has below 50, we can change that. So let's say we drop that down to 40. And if you click recalculate, then you see that student doesn't show up here anymore. And that's because we are no longer getting that 50% alert for that student. Let's go back here. So let's turn this all the way down to -1. So that means we will completely eliminate these tests when a student has below a certain mark. And if we recalculate that, then you can see there are no more alerts about an absolute mark value. And then we can also effectively turn off the Z value checking if we drop our minimum Z value to an impossibly low number. Well, not impossibly low, but so low that it's very unlikely we'll have a student in that range. So if we set this to minus 50, then you see we no longer have any at-risk students. So if you're clicking on an accordion here and it's just not opening, it just means that there's nothing in there. So we no longer have any at-risk students here. So let's set this back up to where it was. So alert min was 50, and we have here Z min of minus 1.5. Then just to explain some of these other ones, omit min. So this is if you, let's recalculate. So if you want to omit students who have a mark beyond a certain level, so for example, if your student here has a mark of 66, right? We want to exclude this from the alerting, then you would just go over and you would say, I want to omit all alerts, or I want to omit all marks that are more than 70%, or let's make it 60%. So if you have a mark above 60%, then it's pointless marking that as an alert. So you can adjust that parameter here. Then this parameter of 1.5, that has to do with the number of alerts. So we want to know how many standard deviations above the mean number of alerts should we use here. So the number of standard deviations here, we can adjust that. So this has to do with the number of alerts. Include 0. This is if we want to allow that a student could get 0%. So in some cases, in some databases, the administrator might set up that 0 has a special meaning, like that a student is actually absent for an assessment. And in that case, the 0 doesn't really have meaning. So we might choose to not include a test for 0%. So that's what that is. So with these parameters, you can control the way that we calculate the at-risk students. And then, of course, you can also change the course code of interest and the year that you want to analyze for over here. Right, so that's to identify the at-risk students. Now, if we want to see more detail about the student, as you click around here, you might notice there are some changes here on the right. So I'm just going to click a bit more so you can see that. So notice the text on the right is changing. So it's changing the student number here, and it's changing the email address, and it's also changing in here. There's some message text in here. So it's changing that message text, and so it's providing you with the text needed to write to the student. So it's making a couple of text comments here, and it's also providing some specifics about the student. So there are some, this eases the process of writing the email to that student. So sometimes the first line is the hardest one to write, and like this, you at least have some kind of messaging to that student. And so you can use this text. When you click send message, it will pop up an email, and the body will be filled in, and you can of course go ahead and edit that body and send that off to the student. So that eases the process of reaching out to the students. Further below that, you also find more information about the student here, and you can see some more specifics. By the way, we've also scrambled the date of birth and the ID number, and that's of course also to protect the student identity. So so you can read the student information here if you want more information about possibly understanding why the student is not performing well. And then here we have more specifics about all the results. So in the summary card, the system is showing us specifically the alerts where the student hasn't performed. And in here, we get more information. So here it gives us all the records for that student. So we get more detail here. Now, that's not the only bit of information. If you close up this part and you click here on all students, then you get more information about each of the students in the course. So it might be that the criteria that we've listed don't capture everything, and so if you click here and you decide, well, there's something unusual going on here, so now at least I have the option to reach out to the student. So you can browse all the students here under all students. So with your accordion style, when you click on something, it will expand that section and close the other section. So if you're looking for that, just scroll down all students, or you can just go ahead and click on the same tab, and that will close it up. So that makes it a bit easier to navigate. So that's basically it. That's how we can do our at-risk checking for our students. And it's a tool that's still under development, as I've mentioned. There are a couple of things. I don't know if you've noticed a certain bug with 100% here, but there are still a couple of bugs being sorted out, and the messaging here will be far improved in a little while. So you will have something easier to work with in the near future. But for right now, with early access, you can start playing around with this tool, and we'd appreciate your feedback and comments and criticisms, especially while we are revamping all our components.